The station hung in space like a massive wheel, spinning slowly against the backdrop of distant stars. Inside, representatives from 47 different alien species gathered in the Great Council Chamber. The room was enormous, with seats arranged in circular tiers that rose toward the domed ceiling. Each species had their own section, designed to accommodate their unique biology. Commander Taeyang stood in the human section, his dark blue uniform crisp and formal. Beside him sat Yuna, the human ambassador. She wore traditional diplomatic robes that blended Earth's cultural heritage with modern design. They had come to this meeting with hope, but that hope was fading fast. The Velkari dominated the center of the chamber. They were tall, reptilian creatures with scales that shimmered between green and gold. Their eyes were cold and calculating. The Velkari had ruled the Galactic Council for over 3,000 years. Their military was the largest in known space, their territory the most expansive. When they spoke, other species listened. Supreme Archon Thalvor rose from his seat. His voice carried through the chamber without need for amplification. The human request for expansion into the Outer Veil territories is denied, he announced. His words were final, absolute. Yuna stood quickly. With respect, Supreme Archon, humanity has followed every rule. We have contributed to galactic trade. Our peacekeeping forces have saved lives across multiple systems. We have earned the right to expand. Thalvor's eyes fixed on her. You have existed in this galaxy for barely 2 centuries. You think this gives you rights equal to species who have maintained peace for millennia? We ask only for the same opportunities given to others, Yuna replied, keeping her voice steady. Your species is dangerous, Thalvor said. The chamber grew quiet. You multiply too quickly. Your technology advances too fast. You are aggressive, unpredictable. We have seen your history. The wars you fought against each other before reaching the stars. The weapons you created. The destruction you caused to your own world. Taeyang felt his jaw tighten. He had heard this argument before. The galaxy judged humanity by its past, never by its present. Every species here has a violent history, Yuna countered. The Kresh Empire slaughtered billions in their conquest era. The Tamorians destroyed their own moon in civil war. Yet they sit on this council with full rights. Why are we held to a different standard? Because, Thalvor said, his voice dropping lower, they learned their lessons over thousands of years. You have not. Your colonies are militarized. Your ships carry weapons that violate the preservation doctrine. You test technologies that are banned by council law. Tests that every species conducts in secret, Taeyang interjected. We just don't pretend otherwise. A ripple of reaction moved through the chamber. Several species shifted uncomfortably. The Velkari Supreme Archon's scales darkened, a sign of anger. You admit to breaking council law? Thalvor asked. I admit that every species in this chamber pursues their own interests while pretending to follow rules that benefit only the oldest, most powerful species, Taeyang said. This council maintains peace not through justice but through force. The Velkari force. Thalvor's expression hardened. Perhaps humanity needs to be reminded of their place in the galactic order. Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. Those words were not just a rebuke. They were a threat. The council will vote on a new measure, Thalvor announced. A complete trade embargo on human space. All routes through council-controlled territory will be closed to human ships. All trade agreements will be suspended. This will remain in effect until humanity accepts supervision of their military and technological development by a council oversight committee. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some species looked shocked. Others nodded in agreement. A few looked uncomfortable but said nothing. That's not a supervision committee, Yuna said, her voice rising. That's occupation. You're demanding we surrender our sovereignty. We are demanding you accept responsibility, Thalvor replied. The alternative is isolation. Choose wisely. The vote was called. Species after species raised their agreement. A few abstained. None voted against the measure except humanity. The decision was overwhelming. Taeyang watched it happen with cold eyes. He had expected resistance, but not this. Not a coordinated move to strangle humanity's expansion and force submission. The Velkari had been planning this for months, maybe years. You have 30 days to respond, Thalvor said. Accept our terms or face the consequences. Yuna looked at Taeyang. They both knew what this meant. Human colonies on the frontier depended on trade routes through council space. Medicine, food synthesizers, fusion cores all came through those routes. Without them, people would die. Taeyang stood and straightened his uniform. He looked directly at Thelvor, then let his gaze sweep across the entire council chamber. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. You believe you can force humanity to submit because you have the largest fleet, because you have held power for millennia, because you have always been the strongest. He paused. You are making a mistake. Is that a threat? Thelvor asked, amusement in his voice. It's a prediction, Taeyang replied. Humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and nuclear fire. We have clawed our way up from nothing again and again. We reached the stars not because it was easy, but because we refused to accept limitations. He looked directly at the Velkhari Supreme Archon. You think you can break us with an embargo? You think we will bow to threats? You don't understand us at all. Then you choose isolation, Thelvor said. We choose to remember this moment, Taeyang said. Every species in this chamber, remember that you voted for this. Remember that when humanity asked for fairness, you gave us threats. Remember that when we asked for opportunity, you gave us an ultimatum. He began walking toward the exit, Yuna beside him. The chamber remained silent as they left. Just before the doors closed behind them, Taeyang stopped and looked back one final time. The Velkhari believe they are teaching us a lesson about power, he said. They're right. Just not the lesson they think. The doors sealed shut. In the chamber, some species felt uneasy. The human commander's words had not sounded like surrender. They had sounded like a promise. Thelvor dismissed these concerns. Humans were young, weak, outnumbered. Their fleet was tiny compared to the Velkhari armada. Their territory was limited. Their resources were finite. An embargo would bring them to their knees within months. It was a reasonable assumption based on all historical precedent. It was also completely wrong. Outside the station, the human shuttle departed. Inside, Yuna looked at Taeyang. They're going to activate the blockade immediately, she said. Minho's colony on New Busan will be the first to suffer. They have sick children who need medicine from the core worlds. Taeyang nodded slowly. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them to convene the assembly immediately. Tell them the Velkhari have made their choice. What choice? Yuna asked. Taeyang looked out at the stars. They've chosen to learn what happens when you threaten humanity's children. The shuttle accelerated away from the station, heading for human space. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued their session, satisfied with their decision. They had no idea what they had just set in motion. History would remember this day. It would remember it as the day the Velkhari signed their own death warrant. The hospital on New Busan was running out of time. Governor Minho walked through the pediatric ward, his heart breaking with each step. Children lay in beds, their small bodies fighting diseases that should have been easily cured. The medicine they needed was on cargo ships that would never arrive. Through the hospital windows, he could see them. Velkhari warships hung in orbit like dark angels of death. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't need to. They simply blocked every ship that tried to approach the planet. A doctor approached Minho. Her name was Bora, and she looked exhausted. We lost 2 more this morning, she said quietly. A boy, 7 years old. A girl, 5, both from infections that basic antibiotics would have stopped. Minho closed his eyes. How many more? 18 children are critical. Maybe 3 days left, maybe less. Bora's voice cracked. We've tried everything. Old remedies, improvised treatments, nothing works. We need real medicine. I know, Minho said. He had sent dozens of messages to the Velkhari commander in orbit. All had been ignored. The blockade was absolute. Across human space, the same scene repeated. Colonies that depended on imports watched their supplies dwindle. Fusion cores began failing, leaving stations without power. Food synthesizers broke down without replacement parts. People started dying not from war, but from deprivation. On Earth, the United Terran Assembly gathered in emergency session. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from every human world, station, and colony. The mood was dark. Hana, the Secretary of Defense, stood at the central podium. Her silver hair was pulled back severely, her expression harder than stone. Behind her, holographic displays showed the crisis unfolding across human territory. The Velkhari blockade is complete, she reported. 97 of our outer colonies are affected. Death toll is currently at 2,418. That number is climbing daily. Angry shouts erupted from the assembly. Some called for immediate military action. Others demanded negotiation. A few voices called for surrender to save lives. Sora, a peace advocate from the Luna colony, stood. We must accept their terms. Yes, it means losing sovereignty, but it saves lives. We can rebuild our independence over time. Rebuild under Velkari rule? Someone shouted back. They'll never let us go. Then we negotiate better terms, Sora argued. But we cannot let children die for pride. This isn't about pride, Hana said, her voice cutting through the noise. The Velkari don't want supervision. They want subjugation. They see humanity as a threat, and they're right to, but not for the reasons they think. She pressed a control and the displays changed. Now they showed military installations, research facilities, ships under construction in hidden orbital yards. For 50 years we've prepared for this moment, Hana continued. We knew the older species would never accept humanity as equals. We knew that one day someone would try to put us in our place, so we've been building, creating, developing technologies that the Council banned because they're too dangerous. A murmur ran through the assembly. Everyone knew humanity pushed boundaries, but few knew the full extent. Admiral Jiho entered the chamber. He was young for an admiral, only 40 years old, but brilliant. He had authored the military strategy that Earth Command hoped they would never need to use. The Cascade Protocol is ready, Jiho announced. We can implement it within 48 hours. Explain it for the assembly, Hana said. Jiho stepped forward. The Cascade Protocol is not a conventional war strategy. We cannot win a traditional conflict with the Velkari. Their fleet outnumbers ours 10 to 1. Their technology is mature and tested. A direct battle would end in our destruction. He paused, letting that sink in. So we don't fight that battle. Instead, we attack their entire civilization at once. We use technologies they don't believe exist. AI warfare systems that learn and adapt. Cyber weapons that can shut down their entire infrastructure. Biological agents tailored to their specific DNA. The chamber went silent. You're talking about genocide, Sora said, her voice shaking. I'm talking about survival, Jiho replied. The Velkari made this a war of extinction. They're killing our children right now, slowly, deliberately. They want us to watch our colonies die until we surrender everything that makes us human. They've given us no choice. There's always a choice, Sora insisted. Yes, Hana said. We can die with honor or we can live. The Velkari chose to make this binary. We didn't start this, but we will finish it. Do-hyun stood suddenly. He was a colonial representative, a man who had lost his wife and 2 daughters when a station in the Outer Rim lost power due to the embargo. His voice was raw with grief and rage. My family is dead because the Velkari wanted to teach us humility. My daughters were 8 and 10 years old. They died in the dark when life support failed. Their bodies are still out there, frozen in space. He looked around the chamber. How many more families have to die before we stop pretending this is about politics? This is about survival. Either we fight or we die. I vote to fight, the vote was called. The chamber divided sharply. Those who had lost people to the embargo voted to fight. Those from safer core worlds hesitated. The peace advocates argued passionately against the Cascade Protocol. In the end, the vote passed by a margin of 53 to 47%. Admiral Jiho was given command of the operation. Hana provided him with authorization codes to access humanity's most secret weapons. The order was clear. Destroy the Velkari military and government infrastructure. Minimize civilian casualties where possible, but ensure the Velkari could never threaten humanity again. Jiho left the assembly chamber and headed directly to Fleet Command. He had ships to position, systems to activate, and a war to begin. In his office, he looked at a photo on his desk. It showed a young girl, his niece, who lived on New Busan. She was in Governor Minho's hospital right now, fighting an infection. He had received a message yesterday that she might not survive the week. The Velkari thought they were teaching humanity a lesson about power. They thought their superior numbers and ancient authority would force human submission. They had studied human history and seen a species that fought itself for millennia. What they missed was the lesson of that history. Humanity didn't just fight each other. They fought nature, disease, extinction itself, and humanity always found a way to win. Jiho activated the fleet-wide communication system. Across human space, on every ship, station, and military installation, his voice rang out. This is Admiral Jiho to all human forces. Operation Cascade is authorized. We did not choose this war, but we will end it. The Velkari believe they can break us. They're wrong. Today we show them what humanity becomes when you threaten our survival. Today we show them why mercy is a choice, not a weakness. All units move to your assigned positions. Cascade begins in 36 hours. On New Busan, Governor Minho received the encrypted message. He looked up at the Velkari ships in orbit, still blocking all aid to his dying colony. 36 hours, he whispered to himself. Then he went back to the hospital, to hold the hands of dying children and tell them help was coming. The Velkari ships in orbit had no idea they had 36 hours to live. The first sign that something was wrong came at midnight, Velkari Prime Standard Time. Communications across the entire Velkari network simply stopped working. Messages failed to send. Data streams cut off mid-transmission. Emergency channels went silent. In the Velkari Military Command Center, officers rushed to diagnose the problem. They found nothing. No physical damage, no attacks, no obvious cause. Their systems simply refused to function. Then it got worse. Defense grids that protected Velkari world started showing random errors. Targeting computers lost lock. Weapon systems went offline. Navigation data became corrupted, showing ships in places they couldn't possibly be. The Velkari Armada, spread across their territory and blockading human colonies, suddenly found themselves blind and helpless. Their ships could still move, but they couldn't coordinate. They couldn't communicate. They couldn't even fire their weapons. Admiral Jiho watched the reports come in from his command ship, the Indomitable. The AI infiltration had worked better than expected. Every Velkari system was compromised. Humanity had spent decades studying Velkari technology, finding weaknesses, creating backdoors. Now those preparations paid off. Phase 1 complete, his tactical officer reported. The Velkari fleet is disabled. Good, Jiho said. Begin Phase 2. I want Commander Taeyang's strike force at Velkari Prime within the hour. Taeyang sat in the cockpit of his fighter, surrounded by the elite pilots of humanity's Ghost Squadron. They were the best of the best, volunteers who knew this mission might be one way. Remember, Taeyang said over the squadron channel, we're not invading. We're delivering a message. In and out, fast and clean. His ship accelerated and the squadron followed. They jumped through human-controlled space gates that shouldn't have reached this far, another secret humanity had kept. The Velkari believed they controlled all long-range travel. They were wrong. The Ghost Squadron emerged in orbit around Velkari Prime, the heart of their civilization. The planet was beautiful, with purple oceans and green land masses. Billions of Velkari lived there. Their entire government was based there. Velkari defense platforms should have destroyed the human ships instantly. Instead, they hung in space, silent and useless. The planetary shields should have activated. They didn't. Taeyang opened a broad-spectrum transmission that would reach every communication device on the planet. This is Commander Taeyang of the Terran Fleet, broadcasting to all Velkari. Your military is disabled. Your weapons don't work. Your defenses are down. We could destroy this planet right now and you couldn't stop us. He paused, letting that sink in across an entire world. But we're not here to destroy. We're here to give you one chance. Surrender immediately. Withdraw all forces blockading human colonies. Provide immediate medical aid to those you've harmed. Do this and we will spare your civilization. If you refuse, we will show you what humanity has been holding back. You thought you knew us. You thought we were weak. You're about to learn how wrong you were. On Velkari Prime, Supreme Archon Thelvor watched the human transmission with rage and disbelief. How had they done this? How had they penetrated every defense? He looked at his military advisors who had no answers. This is a bluff, Thelvor declared. They've used some trick to disable our systems, but they cannot hold this. We outnumber them massively. Once our technicians restore our systems, we will crush them. His chief military officer hesitated. Supreme Archon, perhaps we should consider their offer. They've demonstrated capabilities we didn't know they possessed. Never, Thelvor roared. The Velkari do not surrender to inferior species. Restore our systems immediately, and bring me the human prisoners. If they want to threaten us, we will show them the cost. Within an hour, the Velkari executed 20 human prisoners of war. They broadcast the executions across all channels, ensuring humanity would see. Yuna watched the broadcast from the Indomitable. She felt sick. Those were people she knew. Diplomats, traitors, scientists who had been captured during the embargo. Now they were dead, murdered to make a point. Admiral Jiho, she said quietly. They refused our offer. Jiho nodded. His expression was carved from ice. I know I'm watching. What now? Now they learn why you don't threaten humanity's survival. He opened a channel to the entire human fleet. All units execute Cascade Protocol Phase 3. Release the Genesis torpedoes. Across Velkari space, human ships appeared simultaneously at every major Velkari industrial world, military installation, and government center. They didn't attack with explosives or energy weapons. Instead, they launched missiles that broke apart in the upper atmosphere, releasing an invisible payload. The Genesis virus was humanity's darkest creation. Scientists had debated for years whether it should even exist, but the military had been clear. If humanity ever faced extinction, they needed a final option. The virus was tailored specifically to Velkari DNA. More precisely, it targeted genetic markers that appeared in Velkari military castes and government bloodlines. Generations of selective breeding had made these groups genetically distinct from civilian populations. The virus didn't kill instantly. It took days to incubate, but once it began, there was no stopping it. The infected Velkari's immune systems turned against them, their own bodies becoming their worst enemy. Within 3 days, reports started coming from Velkari worlds. Military commanders were falling ill. Government officials were dying. The warrior caste, the elite who had ruled Velkari civilization for millennia, was being systematically eliminated. The Galactic Council watched in horror. Emergency sessions were called. Representatives from dozens of species pleaded with humanity to stop. They offered to lift all embargoes, to grant humanity anything they wanted. They begged for mercy. Yuna stood before the council once more. This time the chamber was different. Species that had voted for the embargo now looked at her with fear. You asked us to accept your authority, Yuna said, her voice cold. You told us we were too young, too dangerous. You starved our colonies. You killed our children. And when we responded, you murdered our prisoners. We made a mistake. The Kresh ambassador pleaded. Please stop this. Billions will die. Thousands of humans have already died, Yuna replied. Children, families, people whose only crime was being human. You did nothing. You voted to support the Velkari. Where was your mercy then? This is genocide. Sora's voice came through from Earth. Even she, the peace advocate, sounded torn. Yuna, this isn't who we are. It's exactly who we are, Yuna said quietly. We're survivors, and we will never apologize for surviving. On Velkari Prime, the reality of the situation finally penetrated Supreme Archon Thelvor's consciousness. His military leadership was dying. His government was collapsing. The virus was spreading and they had no cure, no defense. He tried to broadcast a surrender, but humanity had stopped listening. Admiral Jiho sat in his command chair, watching reports of the Velkari civilization falling apart. He felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a cold certainty that this had been necessary. A message came through from Governor Minho on New Busan. The Velkari blockade ships had withdrawn, their crews too sick to maintain their posts. Medical supplies were finally reaching the colony. Admiral, my niece? Jiho asked. She's stable, Minho reported. We got medicine to her in time. She's going to live. Jiho closed his eyes briefly. One life saved, but at what cost to his soul? In space around Velkari Prime, Taeyang's squadron maintained their position. They watched as the planet below descended into chaos. Civil war was breaking out. Without their military and government, the Velkari were tearing themselves apart. Commander, his wingman said, is this really what we wanted? Taeyang looked at the planet. No, but it's what they chose when they decided humanity would submit or die. They made this binary. We just picked the option where we survive. 3 weeks after the Genesis virus was released, Velkari civilization was dying, not all at once but in pieces. Their military command structure had collapsed completely. Government officials who weren't infected had fled or gone into hiding. Without leadership, Velkari colonies turned on each other. Some Velkari settlements surrendered to human forces, begging for mercy and medical aid. They hoped humanity had an antidote to the virus, some way to stop the dying. They were disappointed. The virus had been designed without a cure. That had been intentional. Humanity wanted to ensure that if they ever used this weapon, the target would have no way to survive it. Admiral Jiho received reports of Velkari refugees fleeing their homeworlds, trying to escape the collapse. He gave orders to allow them passage through human space, but they couldn't settle in large groups. Humanity wasn't ready to trust them again. On Earth, Sora stood in the assembly chamber once more. She looked exhausted, her face drawn. "We need to talk about what we've done," she said. "The Genesis virus wasn't supposed to spread to civilians, but it has. Genetic drift means it's now affecting Velkari who have some military ancestry, even if they never served. We're seeing children die, Hana. Children who had nothing to do with this war." Hana sat in her chair, her expression unchanged. "Collateral damage is unfortunate but inevitable. We targeted their military and government leadership. If the virus spread further, that's a consequence of Velkari genetics, not our intent." "Listen to yourself," Sora shouted. "You're justifying the deaths of children. This isn't defense anymore. It's extermination. It's survival," Hana replied coldly. "The Velkari chose to make this existential. They wanted to break us. Instead, we broke them. If that makes us monsters, then we're monsters who get to live while our enemies don't." The assembly chamber divided sharply. Half the representatives supported Hana's position. The other half agreed with Sora, but it didn't matter anymore. The virus was out. It couldn't be stopped. In space near the Maelstrom sector, something unexpected happened. A massive fleet appeared on long-range sensors. Admiral Jiho studied the readings with growing concern. "It's a coalition fleet," his tactical officer reported. "Kresh, Tamorians, and about 15 other species. Over 3,000 warships. They're here to stop us," Yuna said. She was on the Indomitable's bridge, serving as Jiho's strategic advisor. "The Council couldn't accept what we did to the Velkari. They're afraid they'll be next." Jiho looked at the tactical display, 3,000 ships against his fleet of 400. In a traditional battle, humanity would be destroyed. "Open a channel to the Coalition flagship," Jiho ordered. The Kresh High Commander appeared on screen. The Kresh were amphibious beings with smooth skin that glistened with moisture. "Admiral Jiho, you are hereby ordered to stand down. The Galactic Council has voted to intervene in this conflict. You will surrender your command and submit to Council authority." "And if I refuse?" Jiho asked. "Then we will destroy your fleet and occupy human space until you're no longer a threat to galactic peace," the High Commander replied. "You've committed genocide. The Council cannot allow this to go unanswered." Jiho was silent for a moment. Then he smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "High Commander, let me explain something about human warfare. We don't fight fair. We don't honor traditions. We fight to win, and we do whatever it takes. The Velkari learned this lesson. Today you will too. You're outnumbered 7-1, the High Commander said. Surrender or die." "Option 3, Jiho replied, and cut the transmission. He turned to his fleet. "All ships activate quantum weapons. Fighter wings launch AI swarms, and someone charge up the stellar disruptor. If they want a demonstration, we'll give them one." The battle began badly for the Coalition. Their first wave of ships moved forward, confident in their numbers. Human vessels opened fire with weapons the Coalition had never seen before. Quantum-entangled ammunition ignored energy shields completely. The projectiles existed in 2 places at once until they hit their target, making them impossible to block. Coalition ships died before they understood what was hitting them. Human fighter wings launched, but they weren't piloted by humans. AI systems controlled each fighter, and these AIs learned and adapted in real time. Every time the Coalition tried a tactic, the AI swarms countered it within minutes. The Tamorians, crystalline beings who fought by forming geometric battle formations, found their mathematics useless. Human ships didn't follow predictable patterns. They moved like they were alive, organic, unpredictable. 2 hours into the battle, the Coalition had lost over 400 ships. Human losses were minimal. The Coalition forces began to waver. Then Jiho played his final card. The human dreadnought Titan moved into position near a nearby star. The ship was enormous, designed for a single purpose. It fired a focused beam directly into the star's core. The star began to destabilize. Solar flares erupted, growing larger and more violent. If the beam continued, the star would go supernova within hours. The Coalition fleet received the data on what was happening. The star's destruction would wipe out 3 inhabited systems, all of them Coalition worlds. Billions of lives hung in the balance. The Kresh High Commander opened communications again. His confidence was gone. You're insane. You would kill billions over this? The Velkari killed thousands of our people and you did nothing, Jiho replied. You voted to support them. You stood by while our children died. And now you come here with moral authority? No, you'll leave or I'll let that star die and take your worlds with it. This is madness. This is humanity, Jiho said simply. We don't bluff. We don't surrender. And we don't forget who stood against us. Leave now or stay and die. Your choice. The coalition fleet began to withdraw. Ship by ship, they turned and jumped away. The Kresh flagship was the last to leave. Before it did, the High Commander sent one final message. The galaxy will never forgive this. The galaxy doesn't have to forgive us, Jiho replied. It just has to fear us. The coalition fleet jumped away. Admiral Jiho ordered the Titan to shut down the stellar disruptor. The star stabilized, disaster averted, but the message was sent. Humanity would use any weapon, no matter how terrible, to survive. On Earth, Sora watched the battle reports with tears streaming down her face. We've become everything we feared, she whispered. Hana stood beside her. No, we've become what we needed to be. The galaxy respects only strength. The Velkari thought they were strong. The coalition thought they could intimidate us with numbers. Both learned they were wrong. At what cost? Sora asked. Our humanity? Our souls? At the cost of our survival, Hana replied. And I would pay it again. In Velkari space, the Remnant Council formed. They represented what little was left of organized Velkari society. They broadcast an unconditional surrender to humanity. They offered to disband their government, to serve humanity in any way demanded, to accept any terms. Admiral Jiho received the surrender offer. He read it carefully, then deleted it without responding. Yuna looked at him in shock. They're surrendering unconditionally, we won. No, Jiho said. A surrender means they still exist as an entity. They still have identity, organization, hope. That's unacceptable. What are you saying? I'm saying the Velkari don't get to surrender. They threatened humanity's existence. The only acceptable outcome is that they cease to exist as a species. 1 year later, the Galactic Council reconvened. The chamber looked different now. Half the seats were empty. Those species had chosen to withdraw rather than face humanity's scrutiny. The remaining species sat quietly, watching as the human delegation entered. Supreme Admiral Taiyang led the humans. He had been promoted after the war ended. Behind him walked Admiral Jiho, Yuna, and several other human military and diplomatic officers. They wore their uniforms with pride, showing no shame for what they had done. The Velkari section was empty. There was no Velkari delegation because there was no longer a unified Velkari people. After the war, humanity had scattered the surviving Velkari across the galaxy. They were forbidden from settling in groups larger than a few hundred. Their technology was stripped away. Their history archives were seized. Velkari children grew up learning human languages, human customs, human laws. Velkari Prime itself had been renamed Remembrance. It was now a human colony, the headquarters of the Terran expansion fleet. Where the Velkari government buildings once stood, humans had built a museum documenting the entire war. Taiyang stood at the central podium and looked around the chamber. He saw fear in the eyes of every species present. Good, he thought. Fear means they'll think twice before threatening us again. The Galactic Council is hereby reformed, Taiyang announced. The old preservation doctrine is dissolved. In its place, humanity proposes the Survival Accords. The principle is simple. Any species that threatens another's survival forfeits all protection under galactic law. You're making yourselves judge and executioner, the Kresh ambassador protested, though his voice was weak. No, Taiyang replied. We're making it clear that actions have consequences. The Velkari chose to starve our colonies. They chose to kill our children. They refused peaceful surrender. Every choice they made led to their extinction. That's not humanity being monsters. That's cause and effect. He pulled up a holographic display showing human territorial expansion. In 1 year, humanity had claimed a quarter of known space, including all former Velkari territory. Humanity will expand, Taiyang continued. We will develop any technology we choose. We will defend our interests with whatever force necessary. Any species that has a problem with this is welcome to voice their concerns here in this chamber. Peacefully. The unspoken alternative hung in the air. Voice your concerns peacefully, or face what the Valkyrie faced. The vote was called. The survival accords passed unanimously. No species dared vote against it. On remembrance, Governor Minho stood in the museum he had created. It was a sobering place. Exhibits showed the Valkyrie civilization at its height, beautiful and advanced. Other exhibits showed the human colonies during the embargo, children dying in hospitals. The final room showed the war's conclusion. The Genesis virus, the coalition battle, the scattering of the Valkyrie people. Minho had insisted on showing everything, including the civilian casualties, the children who died from genetic drift. I want people to remember the cost, he had told his staff. All of it, not just what was done to us, but what we did in return. A young girl approached him, a human colonist maybe 12 years old. Governor Minho? Did we do the right thing? Minho looked at her for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. We survived. But I'm not sure if that makes it right. On Earth, Sora had retired from the assembly. She spent her days writing a memoir about the war. She called it The Last War, though she knew humanity would fight again. They always did. In her writing, she wrestled with a question that had no easy answer. Had humanity defended itself, or had it become conquerors? The line between the two seemed impossibly thin. We were right to defend ourselves, she wrote. We were right to respond to the Valkyrie threat. But somewhere along the way, we stopped defending and started destroying. We didn't just want to survive. We wanted to ensure no one would ever threaten us again. That desire turned defense into extermination. She published the memoir. It became controversial. Some humans agreed with her. Most didn't. The majority of humanity felt no guilt about the Valkyrie's fate. They had threatened human survival. They paid the price. That was justice. Yuna walked through the streets of New Shanghai one evening. The city was thriving, full of energy and life. Humans went about their business, secure in the knowledge that they were safe. The galaxy feared them now. That fear brought peace of a sort. A young man approached her. He recognized her from news broadcasts. Ambassador Yuna, can I ask you something? Of course, she said. Do you regret what we did to the Valkyrie? Yuna thought about the question carefully. It was one she had asked herself every day for the past year. I regret that it was necessary, she finally said. I regret that they forced us to make that choice. But do I regret surviving? No, never. Humanity's first duty is to humanity. Everything else is secondary. Admiral Jiho never retired. He continued commanding the Terran expansion fleet from remembrance. He received requests from younger officers, asking how he justified the war, how he lived with the decisions he had made. His answer was always the same. I don't justify it. I simply did what was necessary. The Valkyrie made this existential. Once a conflict becomes about survival, morality becomes a luxury. You do whatever it takes to ensure your people live. If that makes me a monster, then I'm a monster who gets to watch his niece grow up. His niece, the girl who had nearly died during the embargo, was now 13 years old. She wanted to join the Fleet Academy when she turned 16. Jiho encouraged her, while privately hoping she would never have to make the kinds of choices he had made. 10 years after the war ended, Hana gave her final interview. She was dying, her body finally giving out after decades of stress and responsibility. A young journalist sat by her bedside, recorder running. Secretary Hana, do you regret what humanity did to the Valkyrie? The journalist asked. Hana was silent for a long time. Her eyes looked distant, seeing memories the journalist couldn't imagine. The Valkyrie made a choice, she finally said, her voice weak but clear. They chose to believe that mercy was weakness, that humanity would submit to threats. They chose to kill our children and expect us to surrender. Every species in this galaxy now knows the truth. Humanity doesn't submit. We don't compromise when our survival is at stake. We don't forgive threats to our children. She paused, breathing slowly. The Valkyrie were the last species to learn that lesson. There won't be another. Not because we're righteous, but because we're willing to do what others aren't. That's why the Valkyrie don't exist anymore, and that's why humanity does. But the cost, the journalist pressed. The civilians who died. The children. Do you feel guilt for that? Guilt is a luxury, Hana replied. It's something you can afford when you're not facing extinction. The Valkyrie didn't feel guilt when they blockaded our colonies. They didn't feel guilt when our children died in hospitals. They felt righteous. They felt justified. So did we, she continued. The difference is we won. History is written by survivors, and we survived. She died 2 days later. In the Galactic Council chamber, a new tradition had begun. A plaque was installed listing extinct species. The Velkari name was at the bottom of that list. There was empty space below it. No species wanted their name added. So they lived with fear. Fear of humanity. Fear of what would happen if they pushed too hard, demanded too much, threatened the wrong thing. It wasn't the peace the galaxy had once known. It wasn't built on justice or cooperation. It was built on fear and the memory of what humanity had done to those who defied them. But it was peace of a sort, and humanity thrived in that peace. They expanded, explored, built. They created art and culture. They had children and raised families. They lived. The Velkari existed now only in museums and history files. Their language was dying. Their culture was being absorbed into other societies. In another generation, there would be no one left who remembered being Velkari. They had defied humanity. They had believed themselves stronger, wiser, more advanced. They were wrong, and now they didn't exist anymore.